You mentioned right before telling the story of this elaborate scam that you were on federal probation. How did that happen?
So I mentioned that I own the mortgage company,
Yes.
right? So I had started a mortgage company. I had maybe a dozen guys working for me, and there was fraud. Like I would say, it wasn't all fraud, but whatever, 60-70% of it was fraud that was going in there. And from the outside of that business, it looked very legitimate. We were an FHA approved lender. We were a VA approved lender. We did conventional, probably signed up with 40 or 50 subprime lenders. But there was a considerable amount of fraud, and it kept getting, it became a game, right? I started getting just more and more creative. Like I said, every time I would get away with something, like you become emboldened by it. It's like, nice, like, hey, the underwriter's looking for this and looking for this. And you sit there and go, man, so that she's, that's, what am I going to do? You know what we could do? We could create our own bank. What? Yeah. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go on, like, how do they know if this bank exists? These people are in California or they're in New York. Like, they don't know. So what we're going to do is we're going to go online. And keep in mind, this is 2000, this is 2000, 2001. Like, this is, the internet's in its infancy still, right? So we figure out, I remember GoDaddy, I think, had just come up with a site where you could build your own website. Like, how cool is that? So I go online with a buddy of mine and we create something called the Bank of Ybor. We cut and pasted things that we liked from other banks. And we got a 1-800 number you could call, or a 186 number, whatever it was. And you could call it and it would go to a voicemail. And so we set up this bank. And then I ended up making bank statements, which by this point I already had been making bank statements to prove someone has their down payment. Because a lot of times people, they have good enough credit to borrow 95% or 90%, but they don't have their down payment. So we'd raise the purchase price high enough to cover their 5 or 10% down payment. And we would bring their down payment for them, or we'd have the owner of the house bring the down payment for them. And then we would have a check cut out of the closing statement to a construction company that I owned. And we get our money back. So they get into the house for 100% financing or 110%. Some of them turned into 130. We want to pay off their car, give them an incentive to sign. They still don't have the money to buy it. So we're doing all kinds of insane things. Well, at some point, remember Gretchen Zayas, my old manager?
Yeah, the original.
Yes.
The OG.
She came and worked for me for a short period of time. And then she and her husband went and opened their own mortgage company, which you should have known it was going to be fraudulent from the get-go because it was called creative financing. It was CFM, creative finance. No, creative.
Creative was in the name.
Yeah, creative was in the name.
Oh, boy.
So
it's really on the nose.
So she's doing very well, and we became very close, by the way. Where we'd go on vacation, went to Puerto Rico together. I got married at the time. I was married. Our kids, play together. We babysit. We go to each other's parties. We're close. We're good friends. And she's got her own mortgage company. She calls me up periodically and asks me, hey, can you make a W-2? Or hey, can you make me a pay stub? Sure, no problem. We're friends. That's what fraudulent friends do. So, if I needed somebody to verify rent or verify somebody's rental history or employment, she had cell phones she would answer, that sort of thing for me. Well, what ends up happening is she gets in trouble. She starts doing fraudulent loans for some guys, and these guys are doing what's called a cashback scam. Mm-hmm. So they're getting like a $500,000 loan on a house that's worth $300,000. So they're getting they're buying the house for whatever, $600,000. It's really only worth $350,000. But she happened to be in an area where she could get the appraisal jacked up. So they buy the house, they get $200,000-$300,000 back, And it's a straw man scam, right? It's a cashback straw man scam. So it's a real person that's buying the house. He's got perfect credit, but he's willing to ruin his credit to get a couple $100,000 in his pocket. So he never has any intentions. So it's not a synthetic identity. It's not a stolen identity. It's a straw man. He's a fake, not a fake person, but he's just a straw man. He's a stand-in. So he stands in, he signs the paperwork, he buys the house. They end up getting $200,000-300,000. Well, this guy buys like 5 houses. So it's a $2-3 million. They've lost $700,000. And these guys never even make the first payment. They just let them go into foreclosure. So the bank immediately investigates and realizes this is fraud. So the FBI comes in, they grab Pete and Gretchen. She has to hire an attorney, of course. And she doesn't get thrown in jail or anything. They just come to their office and they tell them they're investigating them. They know what's going on and they want to talk to. They're like, well, look, we want to talk to you and you're going to be indicted. Okay. So she comes to me. Well, actually, Pete came to me and said, look, man, can you refinance our house and get us $75,000 out to pay our attorney? I said, no problem. Gretchen gives me W-2s, pay stubs, fake. The whole thing's fake. I refinance. I get a second mortgage on our house, $75,000. They pay their attorney. Their attorney immediately says, you need to wear a wire on this guy. Like he just got you $75,000. I don't know how you got $75,000. The attorney knows something's wrong because the attorney's like, your whole mortgage company was just shut down. There's no way you could borrow $75,000. So he's like, this guy's doing fraudulent stuff. And she says, yes, of course he is. And he says, you need to work with the FBI, wear a wire against this guy. So she calls me one day and says, listen, I got to talk to you. The FBI is asking questions about you. And I go, what? And she goes, yeah. And I was like, meet me at the pizza place down the street. So don't come into my office because everybody knows she's been indicted. Like everybody in her office quit when the FBI shows up and gives you a business card and announces they're the FBI. Everybody quits. So I said, don't come here because they already know they're already concerned. So I go and I meet her and Pete and we sit down at a restaurant, a little pizzeria, and I sit down and she starts telling me that the FBI is asking questions about me. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Like, what are they asking? And she goes, look, they came in, they took all our files. And I was like, I didn't know any of this. I'm like, when did this happen? She's like, yeah, they a couple of weeks ago. And they have some of your files because I had closed several loans for my wife at the time. We were buying rental properties. My wife didn't have a job. So it's all fraud, but I could not close those loans at my mortgage company because I own the property. So I'm selling those properties. I bought properties, renovated them, and sold them to my wife to get around something called seasoning. Seasoning says you have to wait 6 months to a year to refinance at the market value. Otherwise, if you want to refinance, that's fine, but you have to refinance at the price you purchased the property at. But I bought these properties for $80,000 or $100,000, renovated them, sold them for $200,000-300,000 to my wife, who didn't even get a big mortgage. We were just trying to kind of get around a guideline. So, but my wife was not working. And I provided W-2s and pay stubs. So when she says all this, she says, yeah, they're looking at the loans you gave me at your wife's loans. And I went, oh my God. I said, well, you didn't tell them that the W-2s were fake, did you? You didn't tell them the pay stubs were fake, did you? You didn't tell them that the down payments were, you didn't tell them that we were married, did you? I mean, just absolutely buried myself. Yeah. And as I'm telling her this, I was like, okay, I kind of caught myself and I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Look, okay, here's what you're going to tell them. You're going to tell them you never met her. She called on the phone. Like I start trying to devise a plan that will answer their questions without getting my wife in trouble or them in trouble. And if nobody cooperates, the whole thing should shut down. It doesn't go anywhere. There's nowhere for them to go. If everybody just kind of stonewalls them. So as I'm saying all this, Gretchen says, Matt, we can't lie to the FBI. And I go, what are you talking about? You're already lying to the FBI. I mean, you've been lying to the FBI. I mean, I just refinanced your house. And before I can really say anything, Pete jumps up. Her husband stands up and he says, we've never lied to the FBI. We may not have told them everything, but we've never lied. And I thought, like, who are you talking to? Like, I know that's not true. So you're not saying that for my benefit. So I kind of look at them and I'm like, what? And I remember looking down, and this may mean nothing, but both of their cell phones were right next to me, right? And I remember they were probably just wearing wires, but I just remember thinking those cell phones are microphones.
Yeah.
They probably weren't, but I remember thinking, oh, wow. And I looked at her and I went, wow. And I said, well, I hope you're going to get something for this. And she immediately starts crying. And she says, Matt, I'm sorry. I have a kid. I can't go to jail.
Do you have kids at that point?
Yeah, I have a kid. Like, I have a kid. And I was like, wow. Wow.
What have you learned about friendship from that? Like loyalty.
Oh yeah, it's sweet.
That must have hurt.
It's cute. I mean, I love the idea of it.
You don't think that?
No, I'll tell you why. So I go back to my office. I remember I told her, I said, tell the FBI agent to call me on the phone. Do not come in my office. So I go back. I'm still trying to figure out how to weather this, right? I go back, I sit down. Phone rings. My secretary comes in and says, hey, agent, I'll never forget the guy's name, Agent Scott Gale with the FBI. And I was like, okay, he's on the phone. And she's standing there. I was like, close the door. Like, get out and close it. She's like, so get on the phone. He asked me if I'll come down. I said, yeah, absolutely. Let's schedule it for next Tuesday. I put it off 4 or 5 days. I go to my brother-in-law immediately, who's a lawyer, and he says, "Oh yeah." I mean, I don't really tell him exactly what's going on, but I tell him this is what's happening, kind of, and I may be in trouble. I need a federal defense attorney. I don't even know what a federal defense. I don't even know the difference. But he said you need a federal defense attorney. It's the FBI. So we go on we meet a couple lawyers. I end up getting a lawyer. I give him like $75,000, and he started to have me convinced. Initially, he had me convinced I was probably going to go to jail for a few years. Mm-hmm. But really, that's what they kind of do to justify you giving them $75,000.
Right.
And then, but the more I thought about it, and read, he gave me the guidelines that supposedly I had the fraud that I had committed, and the guidelines that oversaw that. And I read it, and I was like, I'm not really in trouble here. Because I'm looking at a felony, but I'm not going to go to jail because there was no potential for the bank to lose money. So, because I bought the house with like a hard money loan, and then I renovated it with my own cash, and when I sold it, it appraised at $250,000. My ex-wife borrowed like $180,000. So there's plenty of equity. If the whole thing had gone into foreclosure, they still would have got their money back. And to be honest, by the time all of this happened, there was only like 3 of the 3 properties. It was like 5, but we'd already sold a few. And at this point, we'd just sold another 2. There's like 1 or 2 properties left. Mm-hmm. So we're selling, at that moment, we were selling them. So I was like, no, I kind of argue with him. But then he wanted $75,000. I gave him $75,000. And then he comes back and he says, good news. There was no potential fraud. So I can get you 3 years. Now, here's the thing. Here's what I always kind of look back at. When I first went into his office, he said, listen, you haven't been indicted yet. I spoke with the FBI. I spoke with the U.S. attorney. They believe, and they've been told, and he said, look, they didn't tell me exactly what they have, but they said with the evidence that they have on you, based on 2 confidential informants, that it's you cannot go to trial. And I was like, right. Of course, I knew that. And I was like, okay. He said, you haven't been indicted yet. And they are fairly certain that you're running a mill, right? A fraud mill over there. And that you guys are churning out fraudulent loans. Now, they can't come and raid your office and do anything about it yet, because so far they only have you. But here's what I'm saying is that he said, I can keep you from being indicted. It's called pretrial. It's a pretrial intervention where we go in, and what we'll do is you go in, talk to the FBI, you go grab a bunch of your mortgage broker's most egregious files, grab them, bring those files to the FBI, go work with the FBI. They will indict them, and you will not be indicted. And I said, which I kick myself to this day. I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to snitch on them. I'm not going to cooperate. I'm not going to, I'd seen The Godfather. You're not supposed to cooperate. You're supposed to be loyal. And I'm not going to do any of that. And, and so I say all of this where, looking back, like I would have, if I could go back in time, I would have gone into our weekly meeting with a dolly. And I would have walked in front of everybody and scooped up 2 or 3 of the file cabinets and put them in the back of a truck and said, listen, you guys are going to be talking to the FBI soon. I suggest you get attorneys. And I would have driven off. But I didn't. I thought, no, be loyal. Don't do that. And what happened was when the other thing falls apart, right? When the next scam falls apart, every one of these people go to the FBI. Like, they're not even coming to them. These guys are going to the FBI with lawyers. I want to cooperate. I want to tell you what Cox did. I want to help. And I'm thinking, like, I never had to get indicted to begin with.
So you think that most of these people, from your experience, are going to sacrifice all integrity? That's a funny word. Sacrifice.
I'm not sure that applies to this, but that's
right. They're going to sacrifice friendships and loyalty for just to save their own ass.
Yeah. I only had one person that did not talk to the FBI. I had one person that every time the FBI or the Secret Service went to that person's door, she said, don't come to my house again. I don't have anything to say about Matt. I have nothing to do with any of this. Talk to my lawyer. And this happened over and over again. And that's my ex-wife. She's a gangster.